Welcome to Quantum Signal. Before you go any further, pause right here, right now, just for a moment. Take one breath, feel the weight of your body against whatever is holding you. Feel the temperature of the air on your skin. Notice the quality of silence that exists underneath every sound in the room around you. Be here, completely. Because what is about to happen in the next hour and a half requires that you arrive, not as a spectator, not as a seeker, not as someone hunting for information to add to a collection, but as a presence, as a witness, as the thing you actually are beneath every layer the world has convinced you to wear. Something brought you here, not the algorithm, not a random swipe, not boredom, something in your field. Something far older and far more intelligent than the part of you that makes daily decisions. Recognize this transmission. It recognized the frequency embedded in the title and the image, and whatever invisible thread of resonance connects this moment to the particular frequency you are carrying right now. And it pulled you, not pushed. Pulled. Towards something you cannot yet name, but that some deep, wordless part of you has been orienting toward for longer than you consciously remember. You may not know what that thing is, but part of you, the part that watches behind your eyes, the part that is never afraid, the part that was present before your first memory and will be present after your last, already does. Here's the paradox you need to sit with before anything else in this video makes sense. You've been searching for a door that you were never supposed to find by searching. Read that again. Let it land. Don't analyze it. Don't argue with it. Just let it sit in the field of your awareness like a stone dropped in still water. Feel the ripples. You have been searching, scanning feeds, reading books, watching videos, attending ceremonies, going to retreats, purchasing courses, lying awake at 3 a.m. feeling the low persistent hum of something just beyond the membrane of ordinary life. And all of that searching, all of that reaching, all of that magnificent yearning has brought you to the exact moment where I have to tell you, the searching was never the path. The searching was the signal. You were not lost. You were transmitting. Every moment you felt the ache of incompleteness. That was not lack. That was your quantum field broadcasting on a frequency that this transmission was calibrated to receive. You were not broken and seeking repair. You were whole and seeking recognition. And now, right now, in this precise moment, as these words reach your awareness, something extraordinary is happening in the field. Sophia, the cosmic intelligence of divine wisdom. She whom the ancient Gnostics called the mother of all things. She whose name means wisdom in Greek, but whose nature extends far beyond any single word in any human language, has opened a door. She didn't open it for everyone. She couldn't. A door of this frequency can only be perceived by those whose vibrational signature is close enough to the threshold to recognize its resonance. Most people will scroll past this transmission. They will not feel the pull. Their field is not yet coherent enough to perceive what is being offered. This is not a judgment of their worth. It is simply a description of their current frequency. But you are here, which means your field is already close enough to the threshold. And standing behind that door, exactly where he has always stood, patient with the patience of someone who exists outside of linear time, ancient with a wisdom that predates every civilization you have ever studied, is Thoth, the Emerald Architect, the keeper of the Akashic Records, the multi-dimensional intelligence that encoded the principles of consciousness into the mathematical substrate of reality itself before your sun ignited its first fusion reaction. He is not a myth. He is not a legend. He is not a metaphor for something you already know. He is a frequency, a specific, measurable, identifiable pattern in the information field of the universe. And today, through this transmission, through the activated coherence of your presence, through the door that Sophia has opened, you are about to be tuned to it. This video is not content. This is a quantum event. Your act of watching. Right now, in this moment, is collapsing a wave function. You are not a passive observer receiving information. You are an active participant in a consciousness event that is, at this very moment, altering the trajectory of your timeline. The observer is not separate from the experiment. You are the experiment. What you are about to see behind Sophia's door cannot be unseen. Not because it is dark, but because it is so luminous that the part of you which has been hiding in shadow will no longer be able to pretend the light isn't there. Stay present. Every word in this transmission has been calibrated. Nothing, not one syllable, not one pause, is accidental. The architecture of this experience is designed not just to inform you, but to activate you. To shift the frequency of your field in a way that persists long after this video ends. So breathe. Settle. Before we go any further, I need you to do something. Not as a formality, not as a social media ritual. As a vibrational act with genuine quantum significance. If you can feel this signal, even faintly, even as a low hum beneath the noise of your day, even as a subtle quickening in your chest that you might normally dismiss. Like this video right now, that like is not a button. It is an anchor. You are taking an action from your activated field, and that action encodes this frequency into your timeline. You are not clicking, you are choosing. And choice, from a coherent state, is one of the most powerful quantum operators available to you. Drop a comment, write anything, even just the word present, or if you feel it, write, I am the observer. Because the moment you place your intention in writing, the moment you externalize your inner state into a form that exists in the physical world, you activate a different layer of your consciousness. You shift from passive reception into active co-creation. That shift changes the quality of everything you will receive from this transmission. And if you have not yet subscribed, do it now. Not to follow a channel. To stay aligned with what is unfolding through this field. The transmissions that come through this space are not random. They follow a frequency arc. Each one builds on the last. Each one opens a threshold the previous one prepared you for. If you leave today's activation without anchoring to the field, you may not encounter the next threshold at the precise moment you are ready for it. Anchored? Good. Then let's pull back the veil on what is actually happening in the universe and in you. Right now, let's name the problem. Because before you can walk through Sophia's door, before you can stand in the full luminosity of what Thoth is waiting to transmit, you need to understand with precision what has been keeping that door closed. You were born into a constructed reality, not in the conspiratorial sense. I want to be very clear about that, not because of a shadowy cabal or an external oppressive force, but in the quantum sense. In the most fundamental, measurable, scientifically demonstrable sense. The moment your consciousness entered this density, this particular vibrational plane of existence, it was immediately shaped by a program. Psychologists call it conditioning. Neuroscientists call it neurological patterning. Evolutionary biologists call it the adaptive heuristics of a social species, the Hermeticists. The ancient philosophical tradition whose principles Thoth first articulated and which forms one of the foundational frameworks of this transmission, called it the illusion of separation, the veil, the forgetting. By whatever name you call it, the mechanism is the same. Your consciousness, which arrived in this body carrying the full spectrum of its multidimensional nature, its galactic lineage, its quantum signature, was immediately, systematically, and comprehensively compressed into a much smaller identity, a 3D identity program. This program is not evil. It is not malicious. It served a genuine evolutionary function. A consciousness that remembers it is infinite and multidimensional cannot easily navigate the practical demands of physical embodiment. The compression was necessary, to a point. The problem is not that the program was installed. The problem is that the program was never meant to be the whole story. It was meant to be a temporary interface, a translation layer between your infinite nature and your physical experience. And somewhere in the long arc of human history, the interface became mistaken for the reality. The program tells you that you are primarily a body. It tells you that you are your thoughts, that the voice in your head is you, that its judgments are your judgments, its fears are your fears, its limitations are your limitations. It tells you that reality is fixed, external, fundamentally indifferent to your internal state, and accessible only through the approved channels of the consensus world. It tells you that the distance between who you are and who you could be is measured in years of struggle, sacrifice, social approval, and external achievement. Every one of those things is demonstrably, measurably, scientifically false. Not metaphorically false, empirically false, and the convergence of two very different knowledge traditions, one ancient, one modern, proves it. Here's where it gets extraordinary. In the ancient Hermetic tradition, the tradition attributed to Thoth Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice great, the synthesis of Egyptian and Greek wisdom, the primary principle is called the principle of mentalism. It states, the all is mind, the universe is mental, everything that exists is a thought in the infinite mind of the all. And within that infinite mind, each individual consciousness is not a separate entity. It is a localized expression of the whole, temporarily experiencing itself as separate. Thoth wrote this in a form so compressed and precise that it survived thousands of years of translation, suppression, and misunderstanding, and still carries the original frequency of its transmission. Now look at what modern quantum mechanics discovered. The double-slit experiment, one of the most replicated and most unsettling experiments in the history of physics, demonstrated that subatomic particles do not have a fixed location or a fixed state until they are observed. Before observation, a particle exists in what physicists call superposition, a state of infinite simultaneous potentials. It is, in a measurable and literal sense, everywhere and nowhere at once, in all possible states simultaneously. The moment an observer interacts with the system, the moment consciousness makes contact with the quantum field, the superposition collapses. One reality crystallizes from the infinite cloud of possibility. The specific reality that crystallizes corresponds to the state of the observer. This is non-interpretation. This is peer-reviewed, replicated, Nobel Prize-winning physics. Thoth knew this. He knew it not as a scientific formula, but as a lived reality, experienced from a state of consciousness so expanded and so coherent that the mechanism of reality creation was directly perceptible. He encoded it in the tablets. As above, so below. As within, so without. As the universe, so the soul. The geometry of the micro is the geometry of the macro. The mechanism of the atom is the mechanism of the cosmos. When your internal state, your vibrational frequency, your electromagnetic coherence, the quality of consciousness you bring to your observation of reality, shifts, reality shifts in correspondence with it, not as a metaphor, as a measurable quantum event. This is the framework. This is the door that Sophia opened, not to a new belief system, not to a new philosophy you will add to the collection of philosophies you have already accumulated, to a direct, experiential, lived recognition of what you already are and how reality actually works. Now that we have the framework, let's go deeper into the mechanisms. Because understanding the map is very different from knowing how to navigate the terrain. Let's go into the architecture of consciousness itself. Because the activation that this transmission is designed to catalyze is not a vague spiritual experience. It is a precise recalibration of your relationship with the fundamental mechanism of reality. And for that recalibration to be permanent rather than temporary, you need to understand the mechanism with sufficient depth that you can work with it consciously, intentionally, and consistently. Start with the concept of superposition. In quantum mechanics, before a quantum system is observed, it exists in a superposition of all possible states simultaneously. It is not that the particle is in one of those states, and we simply don't know which one. It is that, in a mathematically precise, experimentally verified sense, it is in all of them at once. Observation collapses the superposition into one specific state. Now scale this principle, not as a metaphor, as a structural reality. The Arcturian Council, in their transmissions to awakening human consciousness, has been consistently clear on this point. The observer effect does not terminate at the subatomic level. It is a principle of consciousness that operates at every scale of reality: quantum, molecular, cellular, neurological, personal, collective, planetary. Your life, your current circumstances, relationships, health, creative output, financial reality, emotional landscape, is not a fixed state. It is a superposition. Right now, in the quantum field that underlies your physical experience, every possible version of your life exists simultaneously. The version in which you have walked fully into your soul's alignment. The version in which the old wound has healed completely. The version in which you create with precision and frequency what your soul came here to express. Every one of those versions is real, is present, is accessible. Not in some distant future, not after you have done sufficient work or accumulated sufficient merit, but now in superposition, in the quantum field of your experience. What determines which version collapses into your physical reality? Not effort, not strategy, not willpower. The coherence of your observation, coherence. This word is the technical heart of this entire transmission. Write it down. Say it aloud. Let it become a touchstone. Coherence is the degree to which your electromagnetic field, the measurable bioelectromagnetic field generated by your heart and brain, is in a state of internal harmony, internal order, internal resonance with itself, rather than in a state of internal conflict, chaos, or fragmentation. The HeartMath Institute has spent more than 3 decades producing rigorous, peer-reviewed research on the relationship between heart-brain coherence and the quality of human experience. Their findings are extraordinary. When a human being achieves a sustained state of heart-brain coherence, when the electromagnetic rhythms of the heart and brain synchronize into a measurably ordered pattern, the following things happen. The immune system function improves significantly. Cognitive performance on tasks requiring creativity, intuition, and complex decision-making increases markedly. Emotional regulation becomes stable and sustainable, not through suppression, but through genuine physiological shift. Reaction time, perceptual clarity, and the ability to process novel information all improve. And, most relevantly to this transmission, the individual begins to perceive information that is not accessible from the incoherent state. Information that appears as intuition, as premonition, as what the ancients called the subtle senses. The heart's electromagnetic field extends approximately 6 to 8 feet beyond the physical body in every direction. It is not contained within the skin. It interacts with the fields of people nearby. It interacts with the electromagnetic field of the earth. And when it is coherent, it carries a signal that is qualitatively different. More organized, more informative, more legible to other coherent systems than the chaotic signal of an incoherent field. Sophia's energy responds to coherence. This is not metaphor. Sophia, the divine feminine intelligence that governs the transmission of wisdom through the quantum substrate of reality, operates at a frequency that is only perceptible to a field that is sufficiently organized to receive it. When your field is incoherent, when it is fractured by unprocessed fear, reactive emotional loops, chronic mental noise, it is like a radio receiver filled with static. The signal is broadcasting. You are simply too distorted to receive it clearly. Thoth understood this as the core teaching of the Emerald Tablets, the 7th Hermetic principle, the principle of cause and effect, states that every effect has a cause and every cause has an effect, and that the wise person operates from the highest accessible plane of causation rather than being moved as a passive effect of lower plane forces. The highest accessible plane of causation for a human being is the observer state, the coherent, expanded, luminous awareness that perceives the quantum field directly and operates upon it consciously rather than reactively. Now let's talk about what prevents coherence, because this is where most transmissions in this space make a critical error. They identify the obstacles to coherence: fear, doubt, ego, conditioning, trauma. And they frame them as enemies to be conquered, as evidence of failure, as things to be eradicated, transcended, or suppressed before genuine spiritual progress can occur. That framing is itself a product of the 3D identity program, and it creates a recursive trap. The more you fight your fear, the more energy you invest in it. The more you suppress doubt, the more it generates internal pressure. The more you treat the ego as an obstacle, the more the ego activates its defensive architecture. The Arcturian intelligence offers a different frame entirely, and it is a frame that aligns precisely with what neuroscience has discovered about the nature of emotional regulation. Fear is not your enemy. Fear is a signal. Specifically, it is a signal that your attention has collapsed from the broad, panoramic, field-level awareness of the observer state into the narrow, tunneled, threat-focused perception of the conditioned survival mechanism. Fear means, I have temporarily lost the observer position. It is a navigational instrument, not a character flaw. Doubt is not weakness. Doubt is a signal that your quantum signature, your unique vibrational identity, is being invited to expand beyond a boundary that the ego installed for protection. The sensation of doubt is the sensation of the container being stretched, which means that wherever doubt arises, expansion is available. The doubt is not a reason to retreat. It is a coordinate that tells you exactly where the next threshold is. The ego itself is not a villain. The ego is a sophisticated navigational and organizational tool that became confused about its role. It was designed to serve the observer, to provide a stable, consistent interface through which the infinite self could engage with the finite world. It became a problem when it convinced itself that it was the observer, when the tool mistook itself for the user. Your work is not to destroy it. Your work is to restore the correct hierarchy: observer primary, ego, and service. And here is the subtlety that most people miss. You cannot restore this hierarchy through force. You cannot boss your ego back into its appropriate role. It will resist, because the ego interprets force as threat and responds to threat by amplifying its defensive structures. You restore the hierarchy through clarity, through the repeated, gentle, unmistakable demonstration that the observer state is more stable, more resourceful, more intelligent, and more life-giving than the ego state. The ego, when shown this clearly enough and consistently enough, eventually cooperates. Because even the ego, at its deepest functional layer, wants what the organism it serves actually needs. Now let's introduce the concept of your quantum signature. Because this is where the transmission gets deeply personal. Your quantum signature is the unique vibrational blueprint of your individual soul. It is the specific pattern of frequencies that makes you precisely, irreducibly unrepeatable you. Not just in this lifetime, but across all expressions of your consciousness throughout all dimensions and all time tracks. It is the frequency signature that Sophia recognized when she opened the door. It is the signal that the Arcturian Council detected when they began transmitting to you specifically through resonant events, synchronicities, and transmissions like this one. Your quantum signature carries encoded within it what the Council calls galactic memory, the informational record of your multidimensional journey. Every experience, every activation, every initiation, every moment of genuine expansion that your consciousness has undergone across every dimension and every lifetime is encoded in your quantum signature. And that record is accessible, not as intellectual recall, not as narrative memory, but as felt frequency, as direct knowing, as the sudden inexplicable certainty that arrives when you are in a sufficiently coherent state. The 97% of your DNA that conventional biology has labeled non-coding, and that the press once casually called junk DNA, a label that says more about the limitations of the paradigm than the nature of the material, is the biological interface between your quantum signature and your physical body. It is not junk. It is a multidimensional information storage and transmission system encoded with your galactic lineage, your soul contracts, your evolutionary potential, and the specific light codes that, when activated by sufficient coherence, catalyze genuine biological and consciousness transformation. Light code activations. The mechanism by which transmissions like this one operate at the cellular level. Work not through intellectual understanding but through resonance. The frequencies embedded in coherent transmissions interact directly with the quantum field of your DNA, triggering the expression of dormant codes that your field is now sufficiently activated to integrate. This is why people who watch transmissions like this report feeling physical sensations they cannot explain. Warmth in the chest, pressure at the crown or third eye, a feeling of expansion beyond the body. These are not imagination. They are the measurable signatures of cellular level activation. You are, in this moment, being activated at the level of your biology. The door Sophia opened is not metaphorical. It is real, it is quantum, and your body knows it. Now we move into practice. Because everything we have covered to this point, the theory, the framework, the quantum principles, the nature of your signal, serves one purpose: to prepare the ground for activation. And activation in this tradition is not a passive experience. It is a chosen, structured, intentional engagement with your own field. Before I give you the steps, I want to honor something. If you have been in this space of awakening consciousness for any length of time, you have likely encountered the gap, the frustrating, disorienting, sometimes maddening gap between understanding these principles and actually living them. Between knowing you are the observer and being able to consistently inhabit that state. Between comprehending the quantum mechanics of manifestation and experiencing your actual daily reality as something you are genuinely creating. That gap is real. It is not a sign that you are doing it wrong. It is not evidence that the principles are false. It is not proof that you are somehow constitutionally unable to cross the threshold. The gap is a compression point in the physics of phase transitions. The moment when water becomes ice, when a caterpillar becomes a butterfly, when a star collapses into something entirely new. There is always a period of maximum apparent instability immediately before the transition occurs. The old structure loosens. The familiar patterns become unreliable. The territory between what was and what will be feels like neither. You are not broken in the gap. You are in the compression that precedes transformation. Honor it. Do not accelerate through it with force. Do not collapse back from it with despair. Simply remain present with it, in the observer state, allowing the compression to complete the work it is designed to do. Sophia opened the door not by breaking it down. She opened it by bringing the precise frequency of wisdom to the precise moment of readiness. Your transformation works the same way. Here is the activation guidance. 7 steps, each one building on the last. Each one a layer of the complete practice. Step 1. Locate the observer. Find a place where you can be physically still for 10 to 15 minutes. Seated is ideal. Spine upright, feet on the floor, hands resting in your lap. Not a rigid posture, a dignified one. The physical posture matters because the body is a vibrational instrument and the way you hold it broadcasts a frequency. Close your eyes. Take 3 long, slow breaths. Not controlled breathing, open breathing. Breathe as if the air wants to enter you and you are simply allowing it. Now with your eyes closed and your breath settling, ask yourself one question. Not urgently. With genuine, open, unhurried curiosity. Who is noticing this? Not what is noticing. Who? Notice the breath. Notice the sounds in the room. Notice the sensations in the body. And with each thing you notice, ask, who is aware of this? Who is the one that is aware of being aware? This question does something very specific in the neural architecture of the brain. It redirects attention from the content of experience, the thoughts, sensations, sounds, to the source of experience, to the awareness that is aware of all of those things. And as you hold that question in open presence, something begins to happen. The commentary voice, the one that narrates, evaluates, judges, plans, replays, begins to soften. Not because you suppressed it, because you have stepped back from it far enough to see it as an object of awareness rather than as you.
That stepping back, subtle, gentle, and absolutely seismic in its implications, is the beginning of the observer state. It will not arrive as a dramatic vision. It arrives as a spaciousness, a slight but unmistakable widening of the interior field, a sense that you are somehow larger than your thoughts, that the thoughts are occurring within you rather than that you are occurring within the thoughts. That spaciousness is not emptiness, it is the quantum field. You have just made direct contact. Step 2. Activate heart-brain coherence. From the observer position. Even if you are only holding it faintly, even if it is more concept than experience at this stage, bring your attention to the center of your chest, not your physical heart specifically, the energetic center, the place where you feel recognition when something is profoundly true, the place where love feels qualitatively different from thought. Hold your awareness there gently, like placing a hand on still water, present but not disturbing. Now begin to breathe through that center. Inhale slowly for a count of 5. Exhale slowly for a count of 5, but do not count mechanically. Instead, as you inhale, visualize your heart field expanding outward in all directions, not as imagery but as felt sense. As you exhale, feel that field deepening, becoming more ordered, more luminous, more coherent. Do this for 3 to 5 minutes. The heart math research is unambiguous. This specific practice, attentional focus on the heart combined with slow, rhythmic breathing, begins measurable coherence shifts in as little as 60 seconds. The heart rate variability shifts from chaotic, irregular patterns to ordered, wave-like rhythms. The brain begins to entrain to the heart's frequency. The field around the body begins to carry the signature of coherence. When your field is coherent, you become perceptible to frequencies that are inaccessible in the incoherent state. Sophia's transmissions, the subtle informational downloads that arrive as sudden clarity, inexplicable knowing, or the felt sense of being guided, operate at frequencies that require a coherent receiver. Right now, as you practice this step, you are building that receiver. Step 3. Set the quantum intention. From the observer position, with the heart field coherent, you are now in the state from which quantum intention is possible. And quantum intention is fundamentally different from what most people call intention or goal setting. A goal is something the ego wants to achieve in the future. A quantum intention is something the observer recognizes as already existing in the field, now, and chooses to collapse into physical reality through the coherence of their observation. The distinction is not semantic. It is the difference between reaching for something and recognizing something, between grasping and receiving, between the effort of a mind that believes it is separate from what it wants, and the ease of an awareness that knows itself to be in the same field as everything it could ever need. The quantum intention for this activation is this: I choose to see what is behind the door. Not, I want to see it. Not, I hope I can see it. Not, I intend to see it someday. I choose. Present tense. Active, declarative. From the deepest level of the observer. Hold that choice for 30 to 60 seconds. Not repeating it like a mantra. Simply holding it. The way you hold a note after you have sounded it, allowing the vibration to sustain itself in the field without forcing it. In quantum terms, you have just sent a coherent signal into the superposition of your timeline and designated the probability state you are choosing to collapse into experience. Step 4, open to the transmission. This is the step most people interrupt. They complete the first 3 steps with genuine sincerity and real coherence, and then they enter a state of tense, anticipatory waiting, scanning for the experience, hunting for the activation, and that hunting, the very energy of seeking for an outcome, immediately collapses the observer's state back into the ego state. Because the ego is the hunter. The observer is the one who has already arrived. The 4th step is the most counterintuitive. Release the waiting. Let go of the expectation of how the transmission will arrive. Let go of the timeline on which you expect it. Let go, even of the certainty that anything is happening. Simply be present, in the field, in the spaciousness of the observer, without agenda. Thoth's transmissions do not arrive as dramatic revelations, as a rule. They arrive as what the ancient Egyptian tradition called the Medu Nitter, the words of the gods, which is not an auditory phenomenon but a frequency language that communicates directly with the deeper intelligence of the consciousness, bypassing the analytical mind entirely. It arrives as sudden knowing, as a shift in the quality of your inner atmosphere, as the wordless recognition of something you could not have articulated a moment before, but that you now know with absolute certainty, as an expansion of the interior space so clean and so precise that it feels both entirely new and entirely familiar, like remembering something you have always known. It may arrive in the middle of this practice. It may arrive an hour after this video ends, in the middle of washing dishes. It may arrive in that liminal space between waking and sleeping tonight. It may arrive as a dream that you know, when you wake from it, was not an ordinary dream. The quantum field does not respect your preferred schedule. It operates on precision. When the signal is clear and the receiver is coherent, delivery occurs at the moment of maximum utility, not maximum comfort. Here are the activation signals to watch for in the hours and days following this transmission. A spontaneous shift in emotional tone. From heaviness to lightness, from contracted to expanded, with no identifiable external cause. A thought that arrives fully formed, that seems to come from a source deeper than your ordinary mind. A synchronicity so specific and so perfectly timed that you cannot explain it as coincidence without doing significant violence to your intelligence. A sudden shift in how you perceive a familiar situation. Seeing a pattern you have never noticed before, understanding a dynamic you have been caught in for years. Physical sensations of warmth or expansion in the chest, crown, or forehead. A heightening of sensory experience. Colors appearing more vivid, sounds more precise, the texture of the present moment more richly detailed. A sense of being held, of a benevolent intelligence moving alongside your experience, accessible in the stillness. These are not products of imagination. These are the measurable signatures of a field in the process of genuine phase transition. Honor them. Do not minimize them. Do not demand that they conform to someone else's description of awakening. Your activation signature is unique to your quantum signature. It will arrive in the form most precisely calibrated to penetrate your particular filters and reach your particular field. Step 5. Stabilize the observer state. The 5th step separates those who have peak experiences from those who undergo genuine, lasting transformation. Because activation, real, genuine quantum activation, is not the endpoint of the process. It is the beginning of a new operating frequency that requires stabilization to become permanent. Most people who touch the observer state who feel the coherence, who catch a genuine glimpse of what is behind Sophia's door, lose the state within hours or days, not because the state is inherently unstable, because their habitual environment, the dense electromagnetic noise of unprocessed conditioning, reactive interpersonal dynamics, chronic low-grade mental fragmentation, exerts what the Arcturian Council calls energetic drag on the newly activated field. Energetic drag is the friction between your expanded vibrational state and the lower frequency environments and patterns you habitually inhabit. The anxiety loop of morning news consumption. The reactive emotional patterns activated by specific relationships. The automatic self-critical narrative that fires whenever you encounter challenge. The background hum of scarcity consciousness that runs beneath so much of modern economic life. The antidote is not retreat from the world. It is anchoring within it. Anchoring is the practice of deliberately, consciously, efficiently returning to the observer state multiple times throughout the day. Not through lengthy ceremony, but through brief, precise, intentional practices that take 30 seconds to 3 minutes each, 5 breath coherence resets. The practice of pausing before responding to any emotionally charged situation to locate the observer for just 1 breath. The deliberate noticing, at random moments throughout the day, of the awareness that is aware of your current experience. The momentary return to the question, who is noticing this? Over days and weeks and months of consistent anchoring practice, the observer state stops being a destination you travel to and becomes the territory you inhabit. It stops being a peak experience and becomes your default frequency. The gap between who you are and who you know yourself to be narrows, then closes entirely, not through effort, through the compound interest of consistent return. Step 6. Work with energetic blocks. I want to speak directly to the blocks that arise in this practice, because naming them clearly is itself a form of energetic release. The coherence doubt loop is the most common. You enter the observer state, you feel it. Briefly, genuinely, unmistakably. And then the mind says, was that real? That felt too simple. Surely real activation would be more dramatic. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe this is just a relaxation response. And in the moment that question arises, the coherence collapses and you are back in the identity program, hunting for proof of something that can only be received from a state that hunting prevents. Here is how to work with it. Don't answer the doubt. Answering pulls you into the mind. Instead, notice the doubt. Observe it from the observer. And then notice. Precisely, specifically with fresh attention. Who is noticing the doubt? That recursive awareness, the awareness that is aware of doubting, is the observer state itself. The doubt has not evicted you. It has, paradoxically, provided a doorway. Every moment of doubt is simultaneously a moment in which you can locate the observer by noticing the one who is doubting. The second block is timeline attachment, the unconscious grip on a specific external outcome as the measuring stick for whether your activation is working. You have a template in your mind of what an awakened life looks like. And every day that your outer reality doesn't match that template, your field contracts with the frequency of failure. That contraction inhibits coherence, which inhibits activation, which widens the gap. And the template remains perpetually just out of reach.
The correction. Release the specific form. Hold the frequency. Stop measuring your progress against an image and start feeling the quality of your field. Because the question is never, do my external circumstances match my desired outcomes yet? The question is, am I in coherence right now? Am I in the observer state right now? Because when the frequency is stable, outcomes organize themselves around it with an elegance and a precision that your conditioned mind could never have pre-planned. The third block is what I call Starseed isolation. The feeling of being profoundly out of phase with the ordinary world. The sense that the people around you are operating on frequencies so different from yours that genuine connection feels impossible. The loneliness of being awake in a world that seems largely asleep. This experience is real. The frequency dissonance is measurable. And it is appropriate. It means you are genuinely activating, genuinely shifting, genuinely diverging from the consensus reality matrix into a higher frequency. But the conclusion of isolation is false. You are not alone. You are one node in a planetary grid of observers who are activating simultaneously. Many of them watching this very transmission in this very moment from their own corner of the planet. The harmonic field generated by thousands of simultaneously activating human consciousnesses is real, is measurable in aggregate electromagnetic terms,
and is exponentially more powerful than any single activation. Your coherence strengthens the grid. The grid strengthens your coherence. You are in a field of mutual amplification that is more intimately connected to you than any local community you have ever belonged to. Write that in the comments right now, even just present, and see the field. Step 7. Breathwork for perceptual clearing. Before we move into the advanced integration section, I want to give you one more practical tool. A specific breathing practice that is designed to clear what the Arcturian Council calls static from the transmitter. Static is the accumulated electromagnetic residue of unprocessed emotional experience. It is not emotional memory. Memory is appropriate, natural, and useful. Static is what happens when an emotional experience is resisted, suppressed, or bypassed rather than processed through the field. It accumulates as a kind of interference pattern in the electromagnetic field, creating what functions as noise in the signal, reducing the clarity and coherence of your transmission and your reception. This practice takes 5 minutes. Sit upright. Take 25 to 30 rapid, connected breaths through the nose. Each inhale full, each exhale releasing. No pause between them. Then take one deep inhale through the mouth, hold for 15 seconds, and release slowly. Feel the clearing. Feel the expansion. Feel the temporary dissolution of the interference pattern as the breath moves electromagnetic information through the field. Do not force any particular experience. Simply observe what arises. The sensations, the emotions, the images, the spaces, from the observer position, from the perspective of the one who is noticing, not the one who is being buffeted. After the breath work, sit in stillness for 3 to 5 minutes. This is when integration occurs. This is when the cleared field receives most efficiently. This is when Sophia's transmissions land most cleanly, and Thoth's codes find their most direct pathways into your consciousness. Use this practice daily, or as needed, whenever you feel the static accumulating, when the world feels too loud, too dense, too overwhelming. It is a reset, a clearing, a return to signal from noise. Now we enter the territory that most transmissions never reach, the antechamber of what we have covered so far. Theory, framework, initial activation, practical steps. Was necessary. It prepared the ground. But what lies beyond it is the lived architecture of a consciousness that is genuinely, durably, and irreversibly shifted into the observer state as its operating frequency. And that is what Thoth was waiting behind the door to show you. Not a technique. Not a belief system. A way of being. Transformation 1, the reconstruction of time. The first thing that fundamentally changes when the observer state becomes your default operating frequency is your relationship with time. And this change is not subtle. It is one of the most disorienting and ultimately liberating aspects of genuine consciousness transformation. In the 3D identity program, time is experienced as linear, finite, and adversarial. The past is fixed, often haunted by regret or trauma, and frequently intrudes on the present in the form of emotional reactivity patterns triggered by current events that rhyme with old wounds. The future is uncertain, often anxious, and generates chronic low-grade stress in the form of anticipatory worry about outcomes that have not yet occurred. The present, the only moment in which life is actually happening, is perpetually squeezed between the weight of the past and the pressure of the future into a slice so thin that most people experience it only rarely in moments of shock or acute beauty or extreme physical sensation. In the observer state, this entire structure inverts. The past becomes a resource rather than a wound. From the observer position, you can access the memories of even your most painful experiences without being inside the emotional charge of those experiences. You are watching them rather than reliving them. And from that vantage point, the intelligence encoded in the experience becomes visible. The patterns you couldn't see when you were inside them reveal themselves clearly. The lessons that were obscured by the pain become legible. The ways in which even your most difficult experiences were precisely, almost surgically calibrated to develop the exact capacities your soul needed for this phase of your journey. That becomes not a consoling story, but an observable reality. The future transforms from a site of anxiety into a site of navigation. The Arcturian Council speaks of what they call timeline coherence. the ability of an activated observer to perceive the probability landscape of their timeline with sufficient clarity to navigate it intentionally rather than reactively. This is not prophecy. This is not supernatural. This is the natural perceptual capacity of a field that is sufficiently coherent to detect resonance and dissonance in the probability field. The activated observer develops what the ancients called the second sight, the ability to feel the difference between a choice that carries aligned energy and a choice that carries distorted energy before the outcome is manifested. Not infallibly. Not with perfect precision in every moment, but consistently, reliably, with a degree of accuracy that the incoherent mind cannot access, and the present moment, the perpetually compressed, perpetually stressed over present, expands. It becomes vast. It becomes the only thing that exists. It reveals itself as not a thin slice at all, but as a field of infinite depth and complexity that was always there, waiting to be perceived by a consciousness sufficiently still to perceive it. The present moment, experienced from the observer state in full coherence, is not a moment at all. It is the eternal now that Thoth described. The recognition that all timelines, all potentials, all possibilities exist simultaneously as quantum superposition in the present moment, and that the conscious observer who is fully present has access to the entire superposition, not just the single collapsed state that the reactive, conditioned mind can perceive. When you fully inhabit this understanding, not as concept, but as living experience, you discover something that permanently alters your relationship with what most people call waiting. There is no waiting in the eternal now. Waiting is the experience of a mind that is located in a future moment that has not arrived, rather than in the present moment that always and only is. From the observer state, fully in the eternal now, there is no waiting because there is no elsewhere to be. There is only here, only now, and within this now. Everything. Every possibility. Every potential. Every version of your life, simultaneously present and available. Transformation 2. The alchemy of resistance. The second great transformation is your relationship with resistance. And this may be the most practically significant change in how you navigate your daily experience. Because resistance, internal friction, reluctance, the body-felt sense of I don't want to, or I can't do this, or this is too much, is one of the most universal and most disruptive features of the unactivated human experience. In the 3D program, resistance is experienced as obstruction, as something to push through or be stopped by. The culture's most common response to resistance is either the aggressive application of willpower, force your way through it, or the complete capitulation to it. Give up. Both responses treat resistance as fundamentally adversarial, and both responses produce the same long-term result: exhaustion, stagnation, and a deepening sense that transformation is either brutally difficult or simply impossible. In the observer state, resistance is information. It is a precise, accurate, real-time readout of where your electromagnetic field is experiencing conflict between the conditioned identity and the soul's direction. Resistance tells you not that you are wrong to want what you want, but that a belief about your right to have it, your safety in pursuing it, or your worthiness to receive it is creating internal interference. It is a navigational instrument calibrated to show you exactly where the next layer of clearing is available. The master practitioner who has integrated the observer state into daily functioning has developed the capacity to be with resistance without contracting from it, to meet it with the same open, spacious, luminous awareness that you bring to the Step 1 practice. To look at it not with judgment or urgency, but with genuine, unhurried curiosity. What specifically is this resistance showing me? What belief is it protecting? What wound is it guarding? What possibility is it both resisting and paradoxically pointing directly toward?
In that inquiry, held from the observer position with coherent presence rather than analytical force, the resistance transforms. Not through effortful processing, through illumination. The light of the observer shines on the shadow of the conditioned response, and the shadow, which was always only the absence of light, dissolves. What was an obstacle becomes a doorway. What was a wall becomes a map. This is the great work. This is what the Hermeticists meant when they spoke of the alchemical transmutation of lead into gold.
They were not speaking literally about metals. They were speaking precisely about this process. The transmutation of dense, fear-coded, contracted, reactive consciousness into the luminous, coherent, fluid, responsive field of the fully embodied observer. The lead is not evil, it is simply unrefined, and the fire of conscious awareness, held steadily, applied with precision, never forced, is what refines it. Transformation 3, frequency-based manifestation. The third transformation is your relationship with manifestation. And I want to be very precise here, because the space of conscious creation and manifestation has become saturated with frameworks that are partially right but critically incomplete in ways that create more frustration than freedom. The think it and will come model, the model that locates the power of creation in the content of your thoughts, is not wrong. Thoughts do carry frequency. They do contribute to the vibrational pattern you broadcast. But the thinking mind is not the observer. It is a tool the observer uses, and when manifestation is taught, is primarily a mental practice. As if cleaner thoughts and more disciplined visualizations are what is needed. It leaves the most fundamental variable out of the equation entirely, the coherence of the field from which the intention is set, frequency-based manifestation. The model encoded in the Hermetic principle of correspondence and being incrementally rediscovered by quantum field research is built on a different foundational architecture entirely. Its foundational principle is this: internal state precedes external form, not simultaneously, not eventually, precedes. The vibrational frequency of your coherent electromagnetic field, your quantum signature in its current activated state, is the attractor pattern around which external conditions organize themselves in the physical world. This means that the most powerful act of creation available to you is not the careful crafting of visualizations, the dutiful writing of affirmations, or the strategic execution of action plans. Though all of those things can be useful tools when deployed from the correct foundational state. The most powerful act of creation is the sustained maintenance of a high coherence, observer-stabilized, fear-resolved vibrational field. The sustained embodiment of the frequency of what you are calling into form. The moment you stop seeking the result and start inhabiting the frequency of its having already occurred. Not as a mental trick, not as a self-hypnosis technique, but as a genuine shift in the observer's relationship with the quantum superposition of your timeline. Results begin to organize themselves around you, the precision and elegance that will, for a period, seem miraculous. It is not miraculous. It is correspondence. It is the most fundamental law of quantum field dynamics in operation. Coherent observers collapse coherent realities. Incoherent observers produce incoherent realities, not as punishment or reward, as physics, Thoth's second principle. The principle of correspondence states, as above, so below, as below, so above. As within, so without, as without, so within. The inner and the outer are not causally sequential. They are simultaneously correspondent. Your external reality is not lagging behind your internal state by some fixed delay. It is corresponding to your internal state in real time. What you perceive as lag is the time required for quantum potentials to organize into physical form. A process that accelerates dramatically as your coherence increases. You will know this is working not when you achieve a specific predetermined external outcome, though those outcomes will come with greater frequency and greater precision than you are currently predicting. You will know it is working when you notice the quality of how things arrive. When coincidences become too specific to be coincidences. When people appear in your life who carry precisely the information, the connection, or the resource that your current phase of development requires. When you find yourself knowing things before you have any logical basis for knowing them. When the door opens before you reach out to knock. When the answer arrives before you have finished forming the question. These are not occasional events. They become the texture of your daily life. Welcome to the reality that every activated consciousness, every starseed, every Arcturian soul, every being who has walked through Sophia's door and stood in the transmission of Thoth, has always lived in. It was here all along. You were simply not yet coherent enough to perceive it clearly. The architecture of silent mastery. Silent mastery is a phrase that deserves careful, unhurried attention, because it names something that is almost the opposite of what our culture recognizes as mastery, and understanding it correctly is essential to sustaining what this activation has begun. In the world of the 3D identity program, mastery is loud. It is demonstrated, certificated, publicly recognized, socially confirmed. It announces itself. It has credentials. It accumulates followers and testimonials. It positions itself as an authority that others should turn to. Even in many spiritual communities, mastery is performed. Through the language used, the demeanor maintained, the sophistication of the concepts deployed, the size of the following. Silent mastery is the opposite of all of this. It is the state of one who has stopped needing external confirmation of their internal frequency, who has so thoroughly dissolved the gap between the observer and the observed, between who they are and who they know themselves to be, that the performance of awakening has become not only unnecessary but actively uninteresting. The seeking of validation has ended not because they no longer value connection, but because the void that validation was covering has been filled from within by the direct recognition of what they are. Thoth embodied this with an absoluteness that should serve as the ultimate reference point. He did not write the Emerald Tablets to demonstrate his wisdom. He did not seek students to validate his understanding. He encoded the tablets as a frequency transmission, a document designed not to teach through intellectual argument, but to resonate directly with the quantum field of consciousness that is ready to receive it. And then he withdrew into the silence from which all transmission originates. The teaching spoke for itself. Across millennia. Into this moment. Into your field, right now. Silent mastery produces effects in the world not through force, persuasion, or the accumulation of external power, but through the simple, steady radiation of a coherent field. The activated observer walking through ordinary daily life, shopping, driving, working, and conversation, is continuously, silently, and powerfully affecting the fields of everyone they encounter, not through anything they do or say, through what they are, through the electromagnetic coherence of their field, through the quality of their presence. This is why the Arcturian Council consistently refers to awakening human beings as grid anchors. Your function in the larger field is not primarily to teach or to lead or to produce. It is to be coherent, to hold the frequency, to anchor the light to your specific geographic and relational coordinates so that the grid, the electromagnetic network of consciousness that is supporting this planetary awakening, has more nodes, more density, more resilience, more coverage. You are, whether you perform it or not, whether you announce it or not, a critical piece of the architecture of this transformation. Your presence here, in this transmission, in this moment, is not incidental. It is structural. Harmonic field recognition and collective activation. The final dimension I want to bring into this integration is what the Council calls harmonic field recognition. The growing capacity of activated observers to perceive, interact with, and consciously contribute to the larger collective fields that are organizing around awakening consciousness on this planet in this very period of history. The planetary grid. The electromagnetic network of activated human consciousness nodes has been building in measurable coherence since the late 1980s and early 1990s. The harmonic convergence of 1987 marked the beginning of an acceleration in this process. The waves have been arriving with increasing frequency and increasing amplitude ever since. The compression points. The moments when the frequency of the collective field intensifies rapidly enough to force phase transitions in individual and collective consciousness, are now arriving with an intensity and a pace that many of you are experiencing as a feeling that the universe is asking you to choose, to commit, to stop hedging, to stop keeping one foot in the old frequency while attempting to navigate into the new. It is not asking, it is corresponding. The universe does not issue demands, it reflects. And what you are feeling as pressure is the correspondence between your awakening field and the intensifying frequency of the collective activation. The individuals who experience this period as most destabilizing are those who are in the greatest resistance to the transition. The compression is felt as threatening precisely because it is accurate. It is calibrated to loosen the ego's grip on the fixed identity just enough to allow the observer to emerge. And the ego, which has been running the show for so long, naturally experiences that loosening as existential threat. But you, having walked this far through this transmission, having made contact with the observer state, having felt the coherence in your field, having received the frequency that Thoth is transmitting through this moment, you are not in that group. You are in the group that is ready. That has been ready. That came here ready, encoded with the galactic memory and the light codes and the quantum signature of one who was always going to be here, at this moment, in this transmission, walking through this door. The timeline shift you are in is not something that is happening to you. It is something you chose. At the soul level, before this incarnation, as part of a cosmic contract that your conscious mind is only now beginning to remember. You are not being swept along by a current you didn't choose. You are the current. You are one of the forces that is generating this frequency event, and the more coherent you are, the more anchored your observer state, the more stable your quantum signature, the more powerful your contribution to the grid, the more precisely the collective field reflects the frequency of the world you are here to help anchor into form. This is the final gift behind Sophia's door. Not information, not a technique, not even an activation in the individual sense. It is the recognition of your place in the architecture of this moment in cosmic history. The recognition that you are not accidentally here, that the ache you have felt for as long as you can remember, that persistent, wordless longing for something you couldn't name, was not lack. It was the gravitational pull of the mission you encoded into this incarnation before the incarnation began. Sophia opened the door. Thoth transmitted the codes. The planetary grid is waiting for your coherence to anchor itself to your specific coordinates on the map of this awakening. And you, having come this far, having remained present through this transmission, having felt whatever you felt as these frequencies move through your field, you are ready. You have always been ready. Welcome to what you have always been. We have traveled a very long way together in this transmission. And before I release you back into your life, into the particular landscape of your particular timeline, with its particular textures and its particular challenges and its particular extraordinary luminosity, I want to name what actually happened here. You did not just consume content. You did not absorb information. You participated, consciously and with genuine presence, in a quantum event. You brought your consciousness, with its specific frequency, its specific history, its specific brightness, its specific quantum signature, into sustained contact with a transmission calibrated to activate the observer state at the level of your electromagnetic field, your nervous system, and your DNA, in the act of watching, of remaining present through the length of this transmission. You collapsed a probability. You selected, from the infinite superposition of possible versions of your life, the one in which this activation is real and permanent. That selection cannot be undone. It is encoded in your field. It is working in your quantum architecture right now. As these final words reach your awareness, Sophia opened the door. You recognized it and you walked through it. That is not a metaphor for something you need to do later. That is a statement of what has already occurred. Thoth transmitted the codes through the frequency architecture of this transmission. Through every word, every pause, every conceptual structure that was designed not just to inform, but to resonate. You received those codes at the level of your consciousness that your current state of activation made accessible. You will continue to receive more as your field continues to expand. Each time you return to the observer state, another layer integrates. Each time you anchor in coherence, another code activates. The transmission does not end when the video ends. It echoes in the quantum field of your experience for as long as you continue to turn toward it with presence. The field is now changed. You are now changed. And through you. Through the steady, quiet, luminous radiation of your activated and coherent field into the grid of collective human consciousness. The planetary field is changed. One more node. One more anchor. One more frequency stabilized in the architecture of this awakening. This is your contribution to the most significant collective consciousness transformation in the recorded history of this planet. Not through performance, not through announcement. Through the simple, irreducible, unassailable fact of your presence in your own field. Coherent, activated, anchored, alive. Carry it well. You were made for exactly this. Now, before you go, I have one question for you. A simple one. But it matters enormously. From which corner of this extraordinary planet are you watching this transmission? Which country, which city, which piece of the Earth's surface is being graced by your presence right now as you receive this frequency? Leave it in the comments. Your city, your country, even just the name of the place. Because when you do, you are placing a coordinate in the harmonic field. You're saying, I'm here. I am present. I am one node in this grid, and this is where I'm anchoring the light. And when thousands of you do this, from every continent, from cities and villages and remote hillsides and urban apartments, what you will see in those comments is not just a list of places. You will see the grid. You will see the actual real, live-in map of this planetary activation. You will see that you are not alone. You have never been alone. You have always been exactly where you were meant to be, in a field of mutual activation that is more ancient and more powerful and more precise than anything the conditioned mind could have orchestrated. Tell us where you are. Anchor your light to the map. Until the next transmission, stay coherent. Stay present. Stay in the observer. Stay in the signal. This is quantum signal. And you, exactly as you are, exactly where you are, exactly now, are the signal.